Good evening, and thank you for joining the American Cinematheque Q&A for NOMAD in the footsteps of Bruce Chatwin with Director Werner Herzog. I'm Gwen Deglise, Head Programmer for the American Cinematheque. I'd like to invite you to visit our website, americancinematheque.com, for more information about our programs and how to support the American Cinematheque by becoming a member and making a donation. The American Cinematheque has welcomed Werner Herzog for discussion and retrospective many times over the last 3 decades. This is our first virtual conversation with Werner Herzog and the audience. Enjoy. Thank you.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you so much.
Hello for everyone who is out there, unbeknownst and invisible.
Thank you for joining us. And, I will start by asking you, Bruce Chatwin passed away over 30 years ago.
Yeah, 40 years actually.
Wow. So how did this idea of making a film about him, came about now?
Well, I never planned to make a film, but I was approached by the BBC and they called me up and they said, the BBC is planning to do a documentary on Bruce Chatwin for the 40th anniversary of his passing away. And they thought I would be the right person. And I said, sure, of course, there's no one else. How can you even contemplate a lineup of directors? And I said, no, it shouldn't be done by a journalist from BBC who would do a few talking heads. And I explained to them, I do not need to do any research or anything because I have personal experiences with him and we had a former friendship and we were on the same wavelength in many things. We shared a worldview, so I can start tomorrow. But it should be somehow walking in the footsteps. It has to be a little bit more expansive. It has to be a little bit more expensive than a few talking heads. I have to go to Antarctica. To Patagonia. I should go to Wales. I should go to Australia, and I can do it right away. So it was a film it would have never been made because it was fine for me, having been a friend of Bruce Chatwin. But all of a sudden it was evident. There was an urgency, a vehemence. Yes, it has to be done, and for God's sake, by no one else.
Mm-hmm. You referred to the Victorian cabinet of curiosity of Chatwin's childhood as the key source of his inspiration for his travel. And as you mentioned, you followed in his footsteps and traveled to Patagonia, Australia, Wales. Can you talk about Bruce's nomadic spirit and how your own traveling by foot as a way of life, compare?
Well, the cabinet of curiosities and the skin of a brontosaurus, of course, is described by Chatwin at the very beginning of his book In Patagonia. That instantly made him famous. Mm-hmm. So it's not my invention, it is his. And of course I had to see the remaining piece of the dinosaur. Of course it turns out that it's only 10,000 years old and a fragment of skin of a gigantic sloth, which still roamed about 10,000 years ago the plains of Patagonia. So, and of course, we had a similar experience of traveling, and both of us were traveling on foot a lot. So he walked on foot thousands of kilometers or miles with his leather rucksack. I would travel on foot from early on in my youth, in my adolescence even. I would walk around Albania at the border because Albania was terra incognita and forbidden. And I would do some walks once from Munich to Paris because my mentor, Lotte Eisner, over 80 years old, was dying. And I did not want to allow her to die. And it was like a forceful pilgrimage. I shouldn't allow her to die. And so the existential important things I did on foot, and he did it on foot. And both of us had the experience that traveling on foot, and I'm speaking of traveling on foot not as a backpacker or a hiker, where you have your household with you, your tent, your sleeping bag, your cooking utensils and everything. So we traveled literally without any luggage, very, very few pieces we would have. And we both experienced something that the world reveals itself to those who travel on foot. So that was very important for him and for me, and he always loved my dictum, the world reveals itself to those who travel on foot. And when we met the very first time in Australia, I was preparing a film where the green adds stream, a feature film. And I learned in a newspaper report that he was somewhere in the outback. And I contacted some people and they got us in touch. And I said to Bruce, I'm a filmmaker. He said, I know some of your films. And he even had in his leather rucksack a book of mine of walking in ice. When I traveled on foot from Munich to Paris, he had it on him in his rucksack. Sometimes he would have a few little books with him, and for the darkest hours, he had a small piccolo sort of bottle of champagne. When he was really down, he would either read, or when he was completely and utterly down, he would open this little bottle of champagne. So and we met, and from then on it was storytelling, a marathon of storytelling. And he non-stop, I mean, he's incredible storyteller. So we shared the gift of storytelling in a way. We shared a worldview. We shared some basic ideas that had to do with nomadic life. So in many existential ways, we were very close. At the same time, we kept a cautious distance from each other.
One aspect where we see the closeness is also in the the divide between fact and truth. You mentioned that in Patagonia, some of the conversation and characters that CHATWIN presented as fact, when later it was revealed that it was fiction. And you've been very vocal on your side about making the distinction between fact and truth, in your Minnesota declaration. I was wondering if you could, talk a bit more about that understanding of truth that was similar to you and to Bruce.
I think he would modify, there's a very fine quote by the French writer André Gide. He said, I modify facts to such a degree that they resemble truth more than reality. And he was exactly in this kind of business. And in my films, I'm doing a similar thing. So in other words, changing, modifying facts in order to reach a deeper truth. So those complaints about Bruce Chatwin's of being not completely factually correct, that's what I call the accountant's truth. But he was, and I do this conversation with his biographer, Nicholas Shakespeare. And Nicholas Shakespeare says a wonderful thing. He says, Bruce Chatwin didn't tell the truth. He told a truth and a half. And that was exactly what I always felt. And that's how poetry allows you to find a deeper, more absurd, more magical, more crazy, wilder truth behind simple things that you have to modify and that you have to articulate and shape them.
Werner, how do you navigate in today's political landscape, the poetic approach to truth with the distortion of facts and, for the purpose of political narrative or propaganda? How do you navigate those two aspects and understanding of truth?
I have a very easy time with that because number one, I'm connected to the real world, not only by traveling on foot. And number two, I read and I corroborate what I see on the internet. Just going and reading the full speech of somebody, even a speech of the previous Pope who was accused of this or that, and I wanted to see, I read some of the speeches just to see what was the media craze and what is a real substance. So, and I think we have to learn to navigate and understand the tool of the internet much better. It is easy to corroborate certain things, and of course it's wild times because it's pretty much of it has moved into the realm of how shall I say, celebrity news and this kind of strange TV shows, reality, so-called reality TV, which of course is all fictitious. And of course we know much of it is fictitious and it has been used for politics, but we haven't seen the full scope of it yet. I think it's going to come even wilder with conspiracy theories woven into a narrative. So we'll see what happens, but we can be vigilant, and we have very, very easy ways to find out what is reality and what is fiction. And I would like to give you one example, Michelangelo, because I want to give you the context, the kind of context. You are changing facts and modifying things. When he did the statue of the Pietà, which is in St. Peter's in the Vatican in Rome, Mary is there with her, in her arms, she holds Jesus taken from the cross. You look into the face of the dead body of Jesus, and it's the face of a 33-year-old man. When you look into her face, his mother is 17. Now comes my question. Did Michelangelo try to give us fake news? Did he try to cheat us, lie to us, defraud us, mislead us? No, he had one aim. I want to give those who see the statue a deeper truth, the very truth about the Virgin Mary and about the Man of Sorrows. So it's a context and it's an aim. And you have to make a very clear distinction, and I'm very aware of the distinction.
Thank you for that. We have a question from the audience asking, did you discover anything about CHATWIN while making the documentary that you did not know before when he was alive?
Of course, when I was in the archive of the library in Oxford, the Bodleian Library, all of a sudden his biographer, who has worked in this archive, digging through everything CHATWIN has left, he all of a sudden presents me the screenplay that I wrote based on a novel of Bruce CHATWIN, The Viceroy of Widow. I made a feature film with Klaus Kinski, which is called Cobra Verde. And CHATWIN had annotated with thin pencils hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of remarks and annotations. And so he never told me that he had made that. So it's the first time in my life I see this. And Nicholas Shakespeare asked me, should we stay here longer and you can read it all? I said, no, I shouldn't read it at all. Put it back in the archive. I've done my film, he has written his novel, and that's it. And of course, we discovered photos. I've never seen his little diaries, his notebooks with sketches in it. And it's very, very strange.
Which we see all that in the film. And the moment when you see the screenplay with the annotation is very moving. So you did not read at all any of his comments? It really
no, only on page one I saw, he writes, and he complains about the names. I have a list of cast of characters and names in the cast for it, and it starts right there. And totally fine. It is his book. But I asked, you see, there was a clear understanding. I said to him, Bruce, your story, The Viceroy of Vidor, is narrated in concentric circles. Films normally have a linear progress in their narration. So what I have to do, I have to make fundamental changes in the way of the narration. It will be linear and not concentric circles. Do you have the nerve? Do you have the nerve to let me do what I have to do? And he said, okay, go ahead. And I invited him to Ghana when he was very ill. He was really ill and said, I cannot travel anymore. And if I need a wheelchair, and I said, I send you 6 hammockers, a pole in the hammock, and they will carry you around. He actually was in better shape and he could walk on his own. But he saw me filming and he was there for a fortnight or so and looked and nodded and was content.
Did he see the finished film?
I think so, yes, but we never talked about it.
We have the audience asking if you could talk a bit more about your traveling by foot in your youth and your visit to Lot Eisner in Paris.
It started out in sheer curiosity, being at certain, I think certain things you should do on foot. Existential, I mean, for example, a man, if you're in love with a woman and you want to marry her, irrespective of the distance, do it on foot. Don't make a phone call. And women will understand that. So there's a deep existential sort of thing about it that has to do with the substance of what we are, and it has to do with the intensity of the world that we encounter. You see, when you are tired and you have no water left, and there's no creek and nothing, and there's a lonesome farmhouse, you knock at the door and a startled farm woman, farmer's wife, opens the door and she's startled because there's a sweaty, unkempt man on foot coming, and I would immediately try to calm her and I say, I'm thirsty and I have come 1,000 kilometers on foot, and could you please fill my canteen at your faucet? So yes, she would instantly do it and bring me the water, but then she wouldn't let me go. And the farmer would come, he would come from the field, and I would be stuck with them for the next 6 hours, and they would tell me the most secret, incredible stories of their lives. So there's no small talk anymore, there's essential things. Mm-hmm. And when I walked to Lotte Eisner, it was obvious she didn't know that I came on foot. I wouldn't allow her to die.
How much time did it take you?
Well, it's a little less than 1,000 kilometers, and you can walk 1,000 kilometers easily in 4 weeks, meaning 35 kilometers per day. But I was faster, and at the end I walked 85 kilometers a day and a night and half a day. So I was just sick and tired of walking, and I arrived. And she was out of hospital. And then later, it was very strange, because later she said to me, 8 years later, when she was about 88, we don't exactly know how old she became, because she cheated about her age, but only from age 75 on. I know that she celebrated her 75th at least 2 or 3 times, which was wonderful. And she said, come, but take a train or so. And I came by train, and she said, there's still a spell on me that I must not die. And she said, I'm saturated of life. I'm tired of life. I'm almost blind. I cannot see films anymore. I cannot read anymore. I can barely walk. Now it would be good time to die. And I said to her, fine, yes. It's totally all right now. 8 years ago, you were the mentor, not only for me, but for many in the new German cinema circles. And it would have been too early. But she said, but there's a spell on me that you should lift. And I said to her, yes, it's lifted. hereby, and she died 8 days later. And it didn't hurt because I had the feeling she died right at the right moment and saturated of life in a biblical way.
Mm-hmm. We have a question from the audience regarding your research. You started by saying you didn't have research to do about Bruce Chatwin because he was your friend, but did you do research for the film? And the film is structured in 8 chapters, like a book. At what point did you come up with that structure? How much is it done? Once you've collected all of your image.
Well, I think, yes, it came in editing. I didn't have any plans how I would edit the film. I only knew, for example, what the end would be. And I filmed, there's a long traveling shot, a walking shot through a hedge of hazelnut bushes. It's like a tunnel. And we are walking in the tunnel and walk and walk and walk and walk. And I'm reading the end. I'm reading the end of songlines, which he never read. And people said, yeah, how do you dare to read it? Yes, sure, because I'm his friend and I read well. And he didn't leave it to us. There was some in Patagonia he read, and it's an audio book, but he didn't read all of it. And some of the very beautiful portions I would read for him. And I have absolutely no problem with it. And the structuring into chapters was a very natural thing.
Yeah. Staying in the question of the structure and when do you write, for example, we have those extraordinary visual beauty of your image in many of the films, and in this one, the Shipwreck, the Hills of Silbury, and we have your beautiful text with your voiceover. So the audience really experience visual and written and spoken poetry all at once. At one point, do you write your text? Is it independent or dependent from the image?
No, I do it while editing. And I know in some of the footage that I shot, I knew it would need some explanations. For example, in Silbury, at this prehistoric site, you have these slabs of rock sticking out, and all of a sudden, we found a group of very strange, probably modern pagans with their faces, with face masks and blindfolded, and they're doing a very strange ceremony. And it was, I had a cinematographer from London that the BBC sent. And before I really got his name, I was at a parking lot and waited. And we just exchanged names, and he said, "Did you see these people at the rocks just 100 yards away? And they are all blindfolded." I said, "Is your camera ready?" And before I knew his name, he said, "Yes, my camera is ready." I said, "Let's rush over and let's do it." So, and of course I knew while filming, I needed to explain a few things about the location and about people. I wanted to make them look good and not silly. So it's always, and everyone on my camera has to look at his or her best. And narration always comes in editing.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk about...
I write it spontaneously, I write it instantly, and I have a microphone, a very professional microphone in the editing room, and I speak it instantly. And then we find out, oh, it's a little bit too long, it's 3 seconds too long, it goes over into the next chapter. So I said, can we prolong the image? No, we can't, there's no more footage. So I said, let me cut it down, let me cut the text down. So that's how I function. It's very fast, instantly. And Grizzly Man, which was edited in 9 days, it was not only edited, all the commentary texts were written and recorded.
Wow.
And put in.
And you know, you've directed over 70 films, so there's a speed in your filmmaking, from the research to the editing. Can you talk a bit about the music and the music in Nomad? We have a question of how did you choose the soundtrack, and at one point in the filmmaking journey did the soundtrack emerge?
It started before I started shooting because I wanted to continue with Ernst Reisiger, a very ingenious avant-garde cello player and composer. And I said to him, I need certain pieces of music, and I would like to have the Sardinian, almost prehistoric sounding choir in it from the island, Italian island of Sardinia. They have a very beautiful music, and he plays along with his cello. And I said, I need music that has a certain flow, and it should not be too cerebral. And it has to have a narrative. And I told him about it, and I would show him photos of where I was going. And I said, there will be long, long, long shots in Patagonia or here or there. And he immediately understood and started to create music. And what we normally do is he creates a bucket of music. And I take from the bucket and I toss it in, and it doesn't take me more than 30 seconds flat to put the right music in place.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like this before with other composers like Florian Fricke, Popol Vuh. It was never composed for with a orchestra in front of a screen, and they would at the millisecond exactly start the music and stop it or fade out when the scene was over. It's always some sort of a bucket, or I would reach out for, let's say, some existing music, like in the new film that I made on meteorites. All of a sudden I'm tossing in wonderful music by a Mexican pop singer, Ana Gabriel. You can find it on the internet, 250 million times downloaded. It's a wonderful song, A pesar de todo, despite of everything, I love you. And it makes you cry when you hear it, and this music deserves that it was downloaded 250 million times. Mm. And I knew this was going to be the exact music for what I'm going to shoot. So sometimes the music is first and then comes the shooting.
And you're talking about your upcoming film, Fireball, correct? You're talking about a film that's going to be coming up soon.
Yeah.
In November.
Let's not get too confused, because I also have simultaneously the release a little bit earlier of
Family Romance.
Family Romance, yes. You can find it on a streaming platform, Mubi, M-U-B-I. And people still want to know things about it. But that is a feature film. So, and my plans are, I do have 2-3 feature films that are pushing me hard. There's a great vehemence with which they are coming at me. And then I do not decide by making plans of my career, what should I do next? What kind of bestseller I should transform into a movie? No, these things are coming at me, wildly swinging.
Yeah. We have a couple of questions about, not necessarily Nomad, but in the world of quarantine and now extremely dependent on the internet, have you reconsidered any of the theme you raised in Lo and Behold?
Yes, I go into the internet with more preparedness to dig deeper into it. When I read something outrageous somewhere in a tweet, I just want to verify, what did this or that politician really say? And I read the entire speech, for example. Or I go into background information, so I take more time, but I'm not dependent on the internet. I still do not have a cell phone. I do not want a cell phone. I'm not nostalgic or so. I do it for cultural reasons. I want to connect to the world in a more direct way, with a real world I want to connect, not through an app. Like, for example, finding my way, I do not use what do you call it?
The Waze and GPS and all the
GPS and things like that. No, I get a basic orientation first and I know where I'm going. And it happened that the editor had his girlfriend coming and bringing us espresso and croissant for breakfast. After 30 times, she couldn't find us anymore. And it was less than a mile, and she couldn't find us because her GPS was down. Mm-hmm. And she never looked at the buildings. She never looked at how many traffic lights. It was easy. 5 traffic lights straight, then at the 5th a left, and then immediately a right.
Which can bring us
couldn't
back.
Find us anymore.
Which can bring us back to NOMAD and to the Aboriginal. You know, we have a question: what do you believe modern civilization needs to learn from Aboriginal and native cultures?
I think not very much, because for that we should step back into a nomadic existence, which we can't. And we have to step back into prehistory. So all attempts to explain their understanding of their existence in the world in dream time, which is a big term for them, and the landscape that was probably dreamt by humans, or the landscape dreamt the humans, so the other way around as well. So it's incomprehensible, and you see lots of literature from anthropologists that contradict each other, and you see all the unspeakable bullshit of New Age people, quasi-philosophical babble about it. And I think pretty much everything and everyone is wrong, including, by the way, Bruce Chatwin. I think he scratched a surface of the concepts, and thanks God he doesn't try to postulate that he's discovered the final truth. So he's cautious about it. But I've spoken to Aborigines, and they have their doubts about song lines, and some of them would agree, and some of them. So there's a fog around all this, and don't fall into the trap. We have to learn from the Australian Aborigines. Yes, if you want to learn, you have to become nomadic, and we can't survive not in these 7,500 million inhabitants of this planet. We cannot go out and forage, hunt and forage. We cannot survive in New York City, 8 million people foraging and hunting. You only have the hunting ground would be Central Park, and you have 450 squirrels, but you've got 8 million hungry hunters. So that train has departed, and we have to do the best today. And what we can learn is, for example, that Aborigines until today do not waste food. I do not see it. And we are wasting in our civilizations, we are wasting 45% of food we are throwing away. So just pull yourself together and manage your fridge. So that's a huge lesson.
Yeah. We receive many questions from advice about starting Filmmaker, what advice you would have. And I remember you being at our theaters, and each time a question came back like that, you would say, read, read, read.
Yes.
And is your advice for aspiring filmmakers and young filmmakers still the same? Read, read, read.
Yes, not only they should read, and all the real significant filmmakers that I know of are voracious readers. They all read. They all have lots of books at home, and they talk about books. The other thing is connect to the real world. And part of it might be through traveling on foot or work. I always say don't waste your time away in a film school. It's 3-4 years of wasted time. What you learn in a film school, you can learn in less than a week.
And you founded a school called the Rogue Film School.
Exactly, yes, and it does long weekend seminars. I haven't done it for quite a while, but it's very down-to-earth, guerrilla style sort of behavior. You learn, and as I have advertised it, you will learn 2 things because I spelled it out. Picking safety locks with these little surgical instruments. You have to know how to break into a car or break into an office. Of course, it will be your own office into which you are breaking, but everybody knows, read my eyes, read my lips. And the other thing is I teach them how to forge documents, like a shooting permit for a country where there is a military dictatorship. And I forged a document, a beautiful document in Myanmar, formerly Burma, at the time where it was still a military dictatorship. And I filmed in Myanmar because I had a permit.
And Werner, how does this guerrilla style filmmaking applied to NOMAD? Did you have to recourse to, some guerrilla style filmmaking and twisting rules?
Let me see. Well, wherever I shot, I had no real permit to film. No, but when you're in Patagonia or in somewhere in the outback in Australia, you just shoot there and it's going to be okay. Nobody, you see, you do not do any harm to anyone. I do not wreak havoc. I do not destroy fields that I'm trampling into. I do not hurt anyone. So you have to know what you are doing. It's a context. But if the context requires you to step outside the strictures of the written law, you better do it. The really important thing is you must not get caught. And you would be stupid. It would be stupid to land in jail.
Especially in some countries, yes.
Yeah.
So we have some question about funding and producing. One, how did you start as a filmmaker getting your first film funded and done? And I would add, after 70 films, is it easier to get your funding for your films?
No, it has become more difficult because the basis upon which I had functioned for a long time with, for example, art house theaters that I never liked that much, but theaters like the area or the Cinematheque, or theaters there were in quite big numbers. Distribution companies that would, like the New York films, they do not exist anymore, and audiences have moved away to streaming and to mainstream movies and to Star Wars and all sorts of things. So I'm working on a shrinking basis, but strangely enough, through the internet, all of a sudden, very young people discover my films, the 15-year-olds. They write excited mails to me. How did I do Kaspar Hauser, and what about this and that? And I made the film before their parents had even met or were even born yet.
This is one thing that I remember
yeah.
of the audience, for any of our shows that we have, how young the audience to your films are, and how not just young, but there's all age, but we have a very young audience for your film.
But let me go back. When I was 15, 16, I had projects which never got off the ground, thanks God. I thank God on my knees. I came across some of it that they were really infantile, but in a way very honest and very deep, and they formed me in a way. So nobody would finance a film by a kid that wasn't even grown up yet. My puberty was late. So I was thrown out everywhere, and I thought, just to hell with you. I have to earn money for making a film, which I did. I was in school, I was in high school. During day and during night, I worked the night shift as a welder in a steel factory. and I financed my own films. And at that time it was expensive because you had to buy 35mm raw stock celluloid, and you had to develop it in a laboratory, and cameras were big and clumsy and expensive, and on and on. But until today, my last feature film, which I shot in Japan in the Japanese language, it's called Family Romance LLC. It was so urgent to do this film, and I said it has to be tackled right away. And it was obvious I wouldn't get the finances from anywhere. It was too exotic, too weird, and I had no permits to shoot in the streets of Tokyo, which is very difficult. So I said, I earn the money, I finance it out of my own pocket, which I did. And today with little cameras, even with your cell phone, very high caliber cell phones, you can shoot a feature film that you can show in theaters. I mentioned one film which I saw, Tangerine. The subject matter is not my kind of cup of tea, but a real gifted filmmaker made it. A wild, intelligent filmmaker made it, and it was successful in theaters. So today, don't complain, never complain. Roll up your sleeves, and you can make a 1.5 hour film documentary for under $5,000. And you can make a narrative feature film with actors for under $30,000. Just go out and earn it and start shooting.
On those words, I think it's a good way to say thank you, Werner, for spending the time with us. We are very happy that we were able to have that conversation, and we hope that we will be able to show your films back at the theaters when it's safe to do so. Excited to discover Family Romance LLC and Fireball that will be coming up soon.
Yeah.
And for everyone, spread the words on NOMAD, on the footsteps of Bruce Chatwin. It's beautiful, it's powerful. And it's opening on Friday on the virtual scene everywhere in the country.
Thank you. I wish I could have seen everyone in, at least on the screen, but it was all darkened. So my salute to you, and if you're young filmmakers, just be undeterred. You have to be courageous, go out and do it. I do not accept the culture of complaint. Just go out and do it.
Thank you so much. To the audience, thank you for zooming in and being with us. And check our website for what's coming up.